Unaware his wife was a trillionaire's only daughter, he dropped her at a shelter and told her to find someone else. What would you do if the person you trusted abandoned you at your lowest moment? Here is where everything begins. The moment Ethan Caldwell stopped the car, Aaliyah knew he had not brought her there to talk. Rain swept across the windshield in silver sheets, blurring the red neon sign of Harbor Light Women's Shelter until it looked like a warning floating in the dark. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. The temperature outside was 38 degrees, and Aaliyah wore only a camel-colored coat over the black dress she had chosen for the anniversary dinner Ethan never attended. He kept both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the glass as if the building across the street interested him more than the woman beside him. "Why are we here?" she asked, though the suitcase in the trunk had already answered. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because this cannot continue." His voice carried the same polished calm he used when firing employees. 3 years earlier, she had mistaken that composure for strength. Now she understood it was simply the way he avoided feeling responsible for the pain he caused. "What cannot continue?" Aaliyah asked. He finally looked at her. His blue eyes were tired, impatient, and strangely relieved. "You living like this. Us pretending this marriage is still working. I have spent years trying to move forward, and every time I turn around, you are standing in the same place." Aaliyah glanced down at her hands. No manicure. No designer rings except the simple wedding band he once said suited her because it was honest. Ethan had never known the ring cost less than the cuff links her father's assistant sent her every Christmas. He had never known that she chose modest clothes because luxury had followed her since birth, or that the quiet administrative job he mocked was arranged under another name, so she could build a life no one had purchased for her. "I stood beside you when your company had 4 employees, she said. "I covered our rent when investors stopped returning your calls." Ethan's mouth tightened. "And you never let me forget it. I have never mentioned it until tonight. You don't have to. Your whole life is a reminder of limitation." The words rested between them, colder than the rain. Aaliyah looked toward the shelter entrance, where warm light spilled onto the wet sidewalk. A volunteer held the door open for a mother carrying a sleeping child. "Is there someone else?" she asked. Ethan's silence lasted 1 second too long. Brielle Harrington's face came to mind. Wealthy, connected, photographed beside Ethan at every recent business event where Aaliyah had been told spouses were not invited. "Brielle understands where I am going," he said. "Her family can open doors. She does not expect me to apologize for wanting more." Aaliyah felt something inside her become still. "And what do you expect me to do?" Ethan reached into his coat pocket, removed his wedding ring, and placed it in the center console. "Find someone else." Then he stepped out into the rain, opened the trunk, and set her suitcase on the curb. He did not throw it. He did something worse. He handled it carefully, like luggage belonging to a stranger. When Aaliyah got out, cold water struck her face and darkened the shoulders of her coat. Ethan stood beside the open driver's door, already looking past her. "They will give you a bed for the night," he said. "After that, you need to figure out your own life." She searched his face for even one trace of the man who once promised he loved her because she wanted nothing from him. There was none. "You are certain?" she asked. "More certain than I have been in years." Aaliyah nodded once. She lifted the suitcase handle and walked toward the shelter without asking him to reconsider. Behind her, the car pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the storm. Inside the lobby, an older woman at the reception desk looked up, then froze. Her eyes moved from Aaliyah's face to the small gold pendant at her throat, a crest almost no one recognized anymore. "Miss Monroe," the woman whispered. Aaliyah stopped. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 7 years. The receptionist reached beneath the desk for a phone. "Your father has had people searching for you since this morning." Being recognized should have felt like rescue. But to Aaliyah Monroe, it felt like the past reaching through a locked door. The shelter lobby was warm enough to fog the windows, yet she still felt the cold rain beneath her coat. The receptionist, a silver-haired woman with kind brown eyes, held the phone halfway to her ear and waited. "Please don't call him," Aaliyah said. The woman lowered it slowly. "Your father has people searching every hospital, airport, and hotel in the city." "How do you know my father?" "I used to manage one of the Monroe Foundation housing programs." Her gaze returned to the small pendant resting against Aaliyah's dress. "Your mother wore that crest in every photograph." Aaliyah closed her fingers around it. The pendant had been the only family symbol she kept when she walked away from Monroe Global 7 years earlier. She had changed her last name, declined every trust payment, and asked her father not to interfere in the life she wanted to build. She had believed love would mean more if money never entered the room. Tonight, Ethan had proved that money had entered anyway, only in the form of what he thought she lacked. "My name here is Aaliyah Caldwell," she said, "and I need a room, not a convoy." The receptionist introduced herself as Lorraine Brooks, then studied Aaliyah with the careful patience of someone who understood pride could be both shelter and prison. "We have one bed available," she said, "but your father will learn where you are eventually. Not from me tonight." Lorraine gave her a clean towel, a pair of gray sweatpants, and a key card for a small room on the second floor. Aaliyah carried her suitcase upstairs past walls painted pale yellow and bulletin boards covered with job listings, legal aid numbers, and handwritten notes from former residents. Her room held 2 narrow beds, a dresser, and a window overlooking the parking lot. The second bed belonged to a woman named Marisol, who was asleep beneath a blue blanket with her little girl curled beside her. Aaliyah moved quietly, changed out of her wet dress, and placed her wedding band on the dresser. Ethan's ring was still in his car, resting inside the center console where he had left it. The thought felt strangely final. Her phone showed 14 missed calls. None were from Ethan. 9 came from a blocked corporate number she recognized as Monroe Security. 3 were from her father's longtime chief of staff. 2 were from Brielle Harrington's public relations office, though Aaliyah had no idea why they would contact her. Then a news alert appeared. Ethan Caldwell had been photographed entering the Harrington Grand Hotel less than 30 minutes after leaving her at the shelter. Brielle stood beside him in a white evening coat, smiling as cameras captured his hand at her back. The article described Ethan as newly separated and praised a possible partnership between Caldwell Innovations and Harrington Capital. Aaliyah stared at the photograph until the ache inside her hardened into clarity. He had not made a sudden decision in the car. The announcement had been prepared. Her humiliation was part of a schedule. A soft knock sounded at the door. Lorraine stood outside holding Aaliyah's damp suitcase tag. "Someone left this attached to the handle," she said. Aaliyah took the folded card. Ethan's handwriting covered one side. "Do not come to the apartment. I will have your things delivered." Beneath it, in unfamiliar handwriting, was a second message written in blue ink. "You were warned he would choose a woman who could help him rise." Aaliyah read it twice. "Who brought this?" "A driver in a black sedan. He left before I could ask." Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed a name she had spent 7 years avoiding, Nathaniel Monroe. Aaliyah let it ring once, twice, then answered. Her father did not begin with anger. He said only, "Your husband has requested a meeting with Monroe Global tomorrow morning. He believes Brielle Harrington can introduce him to the family that owns it." Aaliyah closed her eyes. Ethan was about to seek an investment from the trillionaire whose only daughter he had just abandoned at a shelter. The cruelest part was not that Ethan had left her at a shelter. It was that he planned to use her father's empire before the rain on her coat had even dried. Aaliyah stood beside the narrow second-floor window with the phone pressed to her ear, watching taillights slide across the wet parking lot below. Her father's voice carried the same measured authority she remembered from boardrooms, private jets, and childhood dinners where entire industries had seemed to wait for him to finish speaking. "The meeting is scheduled for 10, Nathaniel Monroe said. "Caldwell Innovations is requesting $200 million in expansion capital." Aaliyah almost laughed, but the sound never formed. Ethan had spent years telling her she lacked ambition, connections, and the instincts required to understand his world. Now he was asking her family to finance the future he had decided could not include her. "Does he know you accepted the meeting?" she asked. "He believes the Harringtons arranged it." "Did they?" Brielle's father made the introduction, but the request reached my office 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Aaliyah closed her eyes. Ethan's decision had been made long before the car stopped outside Harbor Light. The shelter had not been a breakdown. It had been the final step in a plan. "What do you want me to do?" Nathaniel asked. The question surprised her. When she was younger, her father had rarely asked. He had protected her by controlling the circumstances around her, convinced that wealth made every danger predictable. It was one reason she left. "Nothing tonight," she said. "Do not cancel the meeting." Silence followed. Aaliyah, he abandoned you at a shelter. And I need to understand whether he became this man because of Betrayal or whether he was always capable of it. Her father's tone softened. You do not need more proof. Maybe not for myself. She looked across the room at Marisol and her daughter sleeping beneath the blue blanket. But if his company is unstable, hundreds of employees could lose their jobs. I will not let my personal humiliation become their punishment. Nathaniel exhaled slowly. You sound like your mother. The words reached a place in Aaliyah she had kept closed for years. I'll call you tomorrow, she said, then ended the call before memory could weaken her resolve. By morning, Harbor Light had become louder and warmer. Coffee brewed in the dining room. Children colored at a folding table, and residents lined up to meet with caseworkers. Aaliyah borrowed a navy blouse from the donation closet and helped Marisol update a resume on an old computer. No one knew she had access to enough money to buy the building, the block, and every company surrounding it. For the first time since Ethan drove away, she felt useful rather than discarded. Then Lorraine entered holding a tablet. You need to see this. A live stream filled the screen. Ethan stood inside the marble lobby of Monroe Tower beside Brielle Harrington, wearing a dark suit and the confident smile he once saved for moments he believed would change his life. Reporters surrounded them. Today marks a new chapter for Caldwell Innovations, he announced. With Harrington Capital and Monroe Global, we intend to build something larger than any one person. Brielle touched his arm and smiled toward the cameras. Ethan has finally chosen partners who understand his vision. A reporter called out, What about your wife? Ethan's expression barely changed. My marriage had been over for a long time. Aaliyah was kind, but she never wanted more from life. At some point, you stop carrying someone who refuses to move forward. The dining room fell silent around the tablet. Lorraine looked at Aaliyah, waiting for anger. Aaliyah felt none, only clarity. On the screen, the elevator doors opened behind Ethan. Nathaniel Monroe stepped into the lobby with his executive team, then stopped before the cameras. Mr. Caldwell, he said, before we discuss your proposal, there is someone whose approval matters more than mine. At that exact moment, Aaliyah's phone received a secure visitor pass to Monroe Tower, labeled with a title Ethan had never known existed. Aaliyah Monroe, sole heir and executive successor. The title on Aaliyah's visitor pass carried more power than every insult Ethan had spoken the night before, yet she did not leave the shelter to prove him wrong. She stood in Harbor Light's small administrative office while Lorraine watched the secure pass glow on her phone. Outside the glass wall, residents moved. Through breakfast, job counseling, and school drop-off as if the city had not just offered Aaliyah a doorway back into a trillion-dollar empire. Your father expects you, Lorraine said. Aaliyah looked down at the navy blouse borrowed from the donation closet and the plain black slacks Marisol had helped press with a travel steamer. He expects the daughter who left 7 years ago. Maybe he is ready to meet the woman who came back. Aaliyah slipped the phone into her coat pocket. Before leaving, she returned to the room upstairs and opened her suitcase. Most of what Ethan had packed was practical. 2 sweaters, jeans, toiletries, a pair of low heels. He had left behind the framed photographs, the books she loved, and every item that made the apartment feel shared. At the bottom lay a small velvet pouch she had forgotten existed. Inside was the Monroe signet ring her father gave her on her 21st birthday. She had never worn it after marrying Ethan. That morning, she placed it on her right hand, not as a symbol of wealth, but as proof that refusing a legacy did not mean erasing who she was. Monroe Tower rose 68 stories above downtown, its pale stone and mirrored glass catching the gray morning light. Aaliyah entered through a side entrance to avoid the reporters gathered around the main lobby. The security system recognized her before she reached the desk. Gates opened automatically. Employees who had worked there for decades stopped in the hall, some with surprise, others with quiet relief. Her father's chief of staff, Evelyn Grant, met her near the private elevator. You look like your mother, Evelyn said. Everyone keeps saying that today. Today you are finally listening. The elevator climbed in silence. On the executive floor, Nathaniel waited inside a conference room overlooking the city. He wore a dark 3-piece suit, silver at his temples, his expression controlled until the doors closed behind her. Then he crossed the room and stopped a few feet away, uncertain whether she would accept an embrace. Aaliyah stepped forward first. For one brief moment, she was not an heiress or an abandoned wife. She was simply a daughter who had spent 7 years insisting distance was the same as freedom. I should have come sooner, Nathaniel said. You should have let me fail without sending people to fix things behind me. His eyes shifted. You know, I know enough to suspect several of Ethan's early contracts were not accidents. Nathaniel did not deny it. I never gave him money directly. I made sure doors opened because you loved him. Aaliyah absorbed the truth without surprise. Ethan's confidence had been built on opportunities he believed proved his superiority, unaware that the wife he dismissed had quietly kept the ground beneath him stable. That stops today, she said. Not as punishment, as accuracy. Nathaniel nodded. Then you will attend the meeting? Yes, but no public reveal until I decide. Minutes later, Ethan entered the conference room with Brielle and her father. He did not recognize Aaliyah at first. She sat at the far end of the polished table, her hair pulled back, the Monroe ring resting beside a confidential file. Ethan's eyes passed over her, returned, and widened. Aaliyah? Brielle looked between them. What is she doing here? Nathaniel took the seat at the head of the table. This is Aaliyah Monroe, my only daughter and the sole successor to Monroe Global. No one moved. Ethan's face emptied of color as every earlier assumption collapsed at once. Aaliyah opened the investment proposal and met his stare without anger. You asked Monroe Global for $200 million, she said. Before we discuss your future, I would like to review how much of your past was built with help you never knew came from me. The first document Aaliyah placed on the table proved that Ethan Caldwell's rise had never been as self-made as he believed. The conference room remained silent beneath the pale morning light, its glass walls reflecting a city that had once made Ethan feel powerful. Now he sat across from the woman he had abandoned at a shelter less than 12 hours earlier, staring at the Monroe signet ring on her hand, as though it had rewritten every memory of their marriage. Brielle shifted beside him, the confidence in her posture beginning to crack. This must be some kind of misunderstanding, she said. Nathaniel Monroe did not look at her. My daughter's identity is not open for debate. Ethan's eyes stayed on Aaliyah. Why didn't you tell me? She opened the first folder. Because when we met, I wanted one relationship in my life that was not negotiated through wealth. I was your husband. And last night, you decided I was worthless because you believed I had none. The words were quiet, but Brielle's father lowered his gaze. Aaliyah turned the first page toward Ethan. It showed the emergency credit line that kept Caldwell Innovations operating during its second year. Ethan recognized the bank, but not the Monroe holding company that had guaranteed the loan. She placed another document beside it. His first national distribution contract had been awarded after Monroe Global privately recommended his firm. A third file revealed that the commercial property he leased below market value belonged to a Monroe subsidiary. You did all this? He asked. I asked my father to let you compete, Aaliyah replied. I never asked him to give you anything you could not earn. I only made sure your work was seen. Nathaniel folded his hands. Your proposals were strong, but without her request, they would never have reached my office. Ethan leaned back, stunned. For years, he had treated every opportunity as proof that he had outgrown Aaliyah. He had mocked her modest job, criticized her lack of connections, and told himself Brielle belonged in the future because she understood influence. All along, Aaliyah had carried more influence than anyone he knew and had chosen not to use it as a weapon. Brielle reached for the investment proposal. Whatever happened privately between them should not affect a business decision. Aaliyah looked at her. It already did. Your public relations office contacted me before Ethan left me at Harbor Light. Someone wanted to make sure I understood that the announcement was planned. Brielle's face changed. I had nothing to do with that. Then your staff acted without your knowledge, or you were lying. Neither possibility strengthens this proposal. Brielle's father closed his folder. We should adjourn. Ethan turned toward him. Walter, we have a signed preliminary agreement. Dependent on Monroe participation, Walter Harrington replied. Which now seems unlikely. Panic surfaced in Ethan's expression. Aaliyah, listen to me. I was angry. I thought you had given up on us. You packed my suitcase before dinner. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no version of the night that could be softened enough to survive the facts. Aaliyah reviewed the final pages of the proposal. Caldwell Innovations had projected rapid expansion based on contracts not yet secured, and credit it could not repay without Monroe funding. Hundreds of employees depended on decisions Ethan had made while assuming someone else would rescue him. "I will not approve this investment today," she said. Ethan's face tightened. "Then you are destroying everything I built." "No, I am refusing to protect you from the truth." She slid a separate agreement across the table. It offered temporary payroll support directly to Caldwell employees, independent oversight, and protection for existing clients, but no personal control for Ethan and no profit for Harrington Capital. Brielle stared at the terms. "This removes him from his own company." "Temporarily," Aaliyah said, "until an audit determines whether the business is stable without hidden guarantees." Ethan looked at her as though he had expected tears, anger, perhaps even revenge, but not this measured mercy toward everyone except him. Nathaniel rose, signaling the meeting's end. Before Ethan could follow, Aaliyah opened one final sealed envelope. Inside was a transfer request submitted by Ethan 3 days earlier, offering 51% of Caldwell Innovations to Harrington Capital in exchange for personal debt relief. At the bottom, under spousal consent, someone had forged Aaliyah's signature. She placed the page between them. "You did not just leave me at a shelter," she said. "You tried to sell the company using my name after deciding I no longer deserved one." The first time Aaliyah Monroe lied about who she was, she did it because she wanted to know whether anyone could love her without wanting access to everything behind her. Name. 7 years earlier, she had met Ethan Caldwell in a crowded coffee shop near Philadelphia, where he was arguing with a broken laptop and a business plan no bank had agreed to finance. He wore a cheap navy suit, spoke too quickly when nervous, and apologized after knocking over her tea. Aaliyah had been living under her mother's maiden name, working as an administrative coordinator for a nonprofit housing group, and renting a small apartment she could have purchased 100 times over. She told herself the life was temporary. In truth, it was the first life that felt like her own. Ethan knew nothing about Monroe Global, the family offices, or the security team that discreetly watched from a distance at her father's insistence. He saw a quiet black woman who carried her lunch in the same canvas bag every day and listened when he described the company he hoped to build. He did not treat her like an inheritance. At first, that felt like freedom. Their relationship grew in ordinary places. Long walks along the Schuylkill River, grocery store dinners after late shifts, Sunday mornings repairing thrift store furniture for the apartment they eventually shared. When Ethan proposed, the ring was modest and his hands shook. "I cannot promise you luxury," he said. "I only want a life we build together." Aaliyah said yes because she believed him. She considered telling him the truth before the wedding, but every time she tried, fear stopped her. She had watched friends change the moment they learned who her father was. Admiration became calculation. Affection became opportunity. Ethan loved the woman he thought had nothing, and Aaliyah wanted to preserve that love long enough to trust it. She did not realize that concealment could protect a relationship while quietly weakening its foundation. During the first years of their marriage, Ethan worked 18-hour days, and Aaliyah supported him without revealing the full reach of her influence. When his first loan application was rejected, she asked Nathaniel to ensure a fair review, not approval. When a major distributor ignored Caldwell Innovations, she arranged for Ethan's proposal to reach the right executive. Without attaching her name, each time he succeeded, she celebrated him. Each time he called himself self-made, she remained silent. She thought she was protecting his pride. Instead, she was helping build a version of him that believed kindness had no value unless it came with visible power. Nathaniel warned her. "A man should know the woman he married," he said during one of their rare private lunches. "He knows me," Aaliyah replied. "He knows the life you chose to show him." She resented the distinction then. Now, sitting inside Monroe Tower with the forged signature between her and Ethan, she finally understood it. Ethan had not merely misunderstood her wealth. He had misunderstood her patience, her restraint, and every invisible door she opened because she loved him. "Why did you hide all of this?" he asked again, his voice lower now. "Because I wanted to be chosen before my name entered the room." Aaliyah closed the old investment files. "And you did choose me, Ethan, until you thought someone richer was available." Brielle looked away. Nathaniel remained silent, allowing his daughter to speak for herself. Ethan stared at the forged document. "I did not sign your name." Aaliyah studied him carefully. For the first time that morning, His denial sounded less polished than frightened. Then who did? She asked. Brielle's father shifted in his chair. Evelyn Grant entered the conference room, carrying a security report. She placed it before Aaliyah. The digital signature had been submitted from Harrington Capital's private legal office, but the authorization code belonged to someone inside Caldwell Innovations. Aaliyah opened the access log. The employee name was not Ethan's. It belonged to his chief financial officer, Marcus Vail, the man who had advised Ethan to leave his wife before the Monroe meeting. Beneath the log was a second file showing Marcus had been secretly negotiating to transfer control of Caldwell Innovations to Brielle's family, with Ethan scheduled to be removed after the deal closed. Aaliyah looked across the table at the husband who had abandoned her to rise higher. He had not realized he was being discarded by the same people he chose over her. The people Ethan chose over Aaliyah had never planned to make him powerful. They had planned to make him useful. He sat motionless at the conference table while Evelyn Grant expanded the security report across the screen. Line by line, the structure of the betrayal appeared. Marcus Vail had approved private data transfers from Caldwell Innovations to Harrington Capital. Brielle's legal office had prepared ownership documents before Ethan ever agreed to the partnership. A transition plan had already been drafted, naming Marcus interim chief executive and reducing Ethan to a ceremonial advisory role once the Monroe investment was secured. Ethan read the final page twice. This cannot be right. Brielle's father adjusted his cuff. Business contingencies are not unusual. You were going to remove me from my own company. Only if necessary. Brielle turned toward her father. Walter, stop. He looked at her with cold impatience. This meeting is already compromised. Ethan stared at Brielle. Did you know? For a moment, she said nothing. That silence answered more clearly than denial. I knew Marcus had concerns about your judgment, she said at last. He believed your personal life made you unstable. Aaliyah felt the irony settle over the room. Ethan had abandoned his wife because he believed Brielle represented stability, only to discover that she had been quietly preparing for his removal. My personal life? Ethan asked. Brielle's expression hardened. You were married to a woman with no visible connections, no capital, and no interest in the future you claimed to want. Then suddenly Monroe Global became available. From our perspective, you looked desperate. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. And you thought sleeping beside me made me easier to control. Brielle's face cooled. Do not reduce this to sentiment. You came to me because you wanted access. I agreed because you had a company worth acquiring. The honesty in her voice stripped away the illusion he had been protecting. There had never been a grand love story between them. Only two ambitions meeting beneath flattering language. Aaliyah looked down at the payroll support agreement. Hundreds of employees were still waiting for decisions, while the people at the table measured one another by usefulness. This ends now, she said. Walter Harrington turned toward her. You have no authority inside Caldwell Innovations. Nathaniel finally spoke. She has authority over every dollar your plan requires. The room went quiet. Aaliyah instructed Evelyn to send the audit findings to Caldwell's independent directors and place all Monroe-linked contracts under review. She also approved temporary protection for employee wages and customer obligations, provided that Marcus Vail was suspended pending investigation and Harrington Capital received no controlling interest. Ethan looked at her with disbelief. You are still helping the company. I am helping the people who did not leave me on a curb. The words were calm, but he lowered his eyes. Brielle stood and gathered her files. You are making a mistake. Without our network, Caldwell will collapse. Aaliyah met her gaze. Then it was never a partnership. It was a takeover. Walter left first, followed by Brielle, whose heels clicked sharply across the marble floor until the doors closed behind her. Ethan remained seated. The confidence that once filled every room around him had drained away, leaving only a man confronted by the cost of mistaking wealth for loyalty. I did not know, he said. Aaliyah closed the screen. You did not ask. You saw what you wanted to see. I was wrong about them. You were wrong about me before they ever arrived. He looked up, and for 1 second she saw the younger man from the coffee shop, frightened and uncertain. But memory was not absolution. Nathaniel rose and left them alone. Ethan reached toward Aaliyah's hand, then stopped before touching it. What happens now? She stood. Now the audit begins. Your board decides whether you remain CEO, and I decide what part of my life still belongs to this marriage. Her phone vibrated with a message from Lorraine. A black sedan had returned to Harbor Light, this time carrying boxes of Aaliyah's belongings from the apartment. Hidden beneath her clothes, Lorraine had found a sealed envelope addressed to Ethan. Inside were confidential Monroe documents that could only have come from Aaliyah's private files, proving someone had entered their home long before he drove her to the shelter. The envelope hidden among Aaliyah's clothes proved that Ethan had not been the only person who misunderstood the value of what she kept quiet. She returned to Harbor Light just after noon, leaving Monroe Tower through a private exit while reporters crowded the front entrance for answers no one was ready to give. Lorraine waited in the shelter office beside 3 sealed moving boxes and a slim gray envelope marked for Ethan Caldwell. Aaliyah recognized the paper before she touched it. It came from a private stationery set stored in a locked drawer at the apartment, one she had not opened since leaving her father's company. Inside were copies of Monroe Global Acquisition reports, internal property maps, and a confidential list of charitable land holdings. None of the files contained passwords or financial access, but together they revealed which neighborhoods Monroe Global planned to invest in over the next 5 years. In the wrong hands, the information could be worth millions. "These were in your suitcase?" Aaliyah asked. Lorraine shook her head. Inside a box labeled kitchen items. Someone slid the envelope beneath a stack of towels. Aaliyah checked the delivery receipt. Marcus Vale had authorized the movers from Ethan's corporate account. The driver's name matched the man who had left the handwritten warning the night before. "You were warned he would choose a woman who could help him rise." The message had not been sympathy. It had been pressure. Someone wanted Aaliyah frightened, isolated, and convinced that Ethan's betrayal was the only danger around her. She called Evelyn Grant and requested the apartment's security records. Within minutes, footage appeared on Lorraine's computer. Marcus had entered the building twice during the previous month using a temporary executive pass. On the second visit, Brielle accompanied him. Ethan was away at a conference. Aaliyah had been working late. They spent 43 minutes inside the apartment. "They knew who you were," Lorraine said. Aaliyah studied the screen. Not everything, but enough to suspect. The realization changed the shape of the past year. Brielle's sudden interest in Ethan, Marcus's constant criticism of Aaliyah, the invitations that excluded her, and the suggestion that her presence made investors uncomfortable had not developed naturally. They had been designed to separate her from Ethan before anyone confirmed her connection to Monroe Global. "Why not expose me directly?" Aaliyah wondered aloud. Lorraine looked at the confidential maps. "Because a secret is more profitable when the person keeping it does not know it has been found." Aaliyah called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" His voice sounded strained. "At the shelter." A long pause followed. "You went back." "People live here, Ethan. It is not a place one escapes and forgets." She told him about the envelope, the footage, and Marcus's access to their home. Ethan denied giving anyone permission, then fell silent as the evidence arrived on his phone. Brielle said she needed documents for the investment review, he said slowly. "She asked whether you kept any records from your nonprofit work. And you told her where my files were?" "I told Marcus the desk drawer sometimes stuck." The confession was quiet, almost accidental, yet it revealed how easily Ethan had treated her privacy as an inconvenience. "You helped them enter our home," Aaliyah said. "I thought they were reviewing company material. You believed them because they looked like the future you wanted." He had no answer. She ended the call and handed the files to Evelyn's security team, authorizing a formal investigation but refusing her father's suggestion that Harbor Light be surrounded by guards. "The women here should not feel watched because of me," she said. Instead, she requested discreet protection and stayed to help Lorraine serve lunch. That afternoon, Marisol asked why expensive cars kept stopping across the street. Aaliyah considered offering another half-truth, then chose honesty. "My family has money," she said. "More than Ethan knew." Marisol looked toward the shelter windows. "And he still left you here?" "He left the woman he thought I was." "No," Marisol replied. "He left the woman you actually were. The money only proves he never bothered to see her." The words followed Aaliyah into the evening. Just before sunset, Nathaniel arrived without a convoy, wearing an ordinary dark coat and carrying 2 cups of coffee. He sat beside his daughter in the shelter's small courtyard and listened while she explained everything. When she finished, he handed her a secure tablet. "The board has reviewed the audit," he said. Caldwell Innovations will survive, but Ethan has been suspended as CEO. Aaliyah looked at the final page. Marcus Vail had transferred the stolen Monroe intelligence to Harrington Capital, but one additional recipient appeared in the access log. Nathaniel Monroe's estranged brother, Victor, who had spent years trying to challenge Aaliyah's right to inherit. Her father's expression darkened. "This was never only about Ethan's company," he said. "Someone was using your marriage to remove you from Monroe Global before you ever returned." The moment Victor Monroe's name appeared in the access log, Aaliyah understood that her broken marriage had been used as a doorway into her family's empire. She sat beside Nathaniel in Harbor Light's quiet courtyard while evening settled over the city, the secure tablet glowing between them. Victor's name was attached to 3 encrypted transfers, each routed through a private investment office in Delaware in time to coincide with Marcus Vail's visits to Aaliyah's apartment. Her uncle had always treated inheritance like a competition he had been unfairly excluded from. After Aaliyah's mother died, he spent years arguing that Monroe Global should pass to the most experienced executive, not the founder's only child. When Aaliyah walked away from the company, Victor acted relieved. Nathaniel now understood that relief had been strategy. "He believed you would never return," her father said. "And if Ethan publicly abandoned me, Victor could argue I was unstable, disconnected, and unfit to inherit." Nathaniel nodded. "Especially if confidential documents were found in your husband's company." Aaliyah looked back toward the shelter windows. Women were clearing dinner trays, children were laughing near the television, and Lorraine was helping Marisol prepare for a job interview. The ordinary warmth of the place made the conspiracy surrounding her feel even colder. "Then we do not react publicly yet," she said. "Victor expects anger. Let him believe I am still too humiliated to think clearly." Nathaniel studied her with something close to pride. "What are you planning?" "I am going back." "To Monroe Global?" "To all of it." The next morning, a row of black cars arrived outside Harbor Light, but Aaliyah stepped into only one. She wore a deep emerald suit from her old wardrobe, brought from storage overnight, and the Monroe signet ring on her right hand. Her hair was swept into a low braided bun, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. Lorraine hugged her before she left. "Do not let that building convince you power has to be loud," she said. "You were stronger here with borrowed clothes." Monroe Tower was surrounded by reporters when Aaliyah arrived. Nathaniel had not announced her return, but someone inside the company had leaked her visitor status. Cameras turned as she crossed the marble lobby. Questions rose from every direction. "Are you Nathaniel Monroe's daughter? Did your husband know? Were you really staying at a shelter?" Aaliyah did not stop. She entered the private elevator while the doors closed on the noise. On the top floor, Monroe Global's board had gathered for an emergency succession meeting. Victor stood near the windows in a silver-gray suit, smiling with the patience of a man who believed he had already won. He opened his arms when she entered. "Aaliyah, after all these years." "Uncle Victor." His gaze moved over her clothes, searching for signs of collapse. "I heard about your marriage. Terrible timing." "For whom?" His smile tightened. Nathaniel took his seat at the head of the table. "This meeting concerns the security breach and the future leadership of Monroe Global." Victor folded his hands. "Then we should begin with the obvious concern. Aaliyah has been absent from the company for 7 years. Her personal life is in public chaos, and confidential materials were found outside approved systems." Aaliyah placed the tablet on the table. "Materials your office received from Marcus Vail." Several directors turned toward Victor. He did not flinch. "Anyone can fabricate an access log." Evelyn Grant distributed certified copies from Monroe's independent cybersecurity firm. "These records are authenticated." Victor glanced at the pages, then looked at Nathaniel. "Even if true, perhaps I was gathering evidence of her negligence." Aaliyah opened a second file. "Then explain why your legal team drafted a petition to suspend my inheritance rights before the documents were discovered." The room shifted. Victor's confidence thinned. Nathaniel remained silent, allowing his daughter to control the moment. "You used Ethan's ambition, Marcus's access, and Brielle's family to create a scandal around me," Aaliyah said. "You expected me to disappear again." Victor leaned forward. "And what exactly do you intend to do now?" Aaliyah looked around the table at the directors who had once known her only as Nathaniel's sheltered daughter. "I intend to return as executive successor, complete an independent audit, and protect every employee and charitable program Victor placed at risk. Her uncle gave a short laugh. You think spending one night in a shelter prepares you to run a trillion-dollar empire? Aaliyah met his eyes. No, but choosing to stay long enough to see who gets forgotten taught me exactly what this empire should be for. Nathaniel slid a sealed resolution across the table. A majority of the board had already signed it. Aaliyah Monroe was reinstated as sole successor with immediate oversight authority. Victor's voting privileges were suspended pending investigation. As security escorted him from the room, he paused beside Aaliyah. Your husband will drag you down with him. She did not turn. He already tried. Then Evelyn placed one final document before her. Ethan had requested a private meeting, not to reclaim his position, but to surrender every share he owned in Caldwell Innovations. Attached was a handwritten note. I told you to find someone else. I did not understand you had already spent years trying to find yourself. The most powerful moment of Aaliyah Monroe's return was not when the board restored her title, but when she entered the largest investment forum of Ethan's career and refused to look at him first. 2 weeks after Victor's suspension, Monroe Global hosted its annual Capital Futures Summit inside the glass atrium of the Franklin Center. Sunlight poured through the vaulted ceiling, striking white marble, polished steel, and the gold insignia of companies that managed more wealth than some nations. Executives, investors, and reporters filled the room, waiting for Nathaniel Monroe to announce the next generation of leadership. Ethan stood near the side entrance in a plain dark suit, no longer surrounded by assistants or Harrington advisors. The board of Caldwell Innovations had accepted his temporary removal, and his shares remained frozen pending the audit. He had requested a private meeting with Aaliyah 3 times. She had declined each one, not out of cruelty, but because apologies offered in private could not correct choices made so publicly. Brielle arrived with her father shortly before the program began. She wore a structured white dress and carried herself with the composure of someone determined to survive a scandal by appearing untouched by it. Marcus Vail was absent, suspended, and under formal investigation. Victor's seat in the front row remained empty. Aaliyah entered through the main doors beside Nathaniel, wearing a midnight blue suit with a soft bronze blouse and her mother's pendant at her throat. No limousine announcement preceded her. No dramatic music marked the moment. Yet conversations stopped one by one as people recognized the woman whose photograph had appeared beside headlines about the Monroe succession, the Caldwell collapse, and the shelter where she had spent the night her husband discarded her. Ethan turned. The distance between them measured less than 50 feet, but it held 7 years of withheld truth, 1 broken marriage, and every word he could no longer take back. Aaliyah did not slow. She greeted employees first, then the directors, then Lorraine Brooks, whom she had invited as an honored guest. Marisol sat beside Lorraine in a borrowed green dress, holding the offer letter from the job Monroe Global's housing division had given her after a fair interview. Aaliyah had insisted no one receive charity disguised as employment. When Nathaniel reached the stage, the room settled. Monroe Global was built to move capital, he said. My daughter intends to make certain it also moves responsibility. He invited Aaliyah forward. She stood beneath the bright atrium lights and looked across the audience. For years, I believed stepping away from wealth was the only way to prove it did not define me, she began. I was wrong. Power is not made harmless by refusing to use it. It becomes harmless only when it is accountable to the people who live with its consequences. Her words carried without force. She announced a new investment standard requiring every Monroe-backed company to protect employee wages, disclose hidden ownership agreements, and fund housing support in the communities where it expanded. The first initiative would begin with Harbor Light, which Monroe Global would purchase from its struggling landlord and transfer into an independent nonprofit trust led by Lorraine. The shelter would remain a place of dignity, not a monument to Aaliyah's pain. Reporters lifted cameras. Investors whispered. Ethan watched without moving. Then Aaliyah addressed Caldwell Innovations. The company will receive temporary stabilization funding, she said. Not because its former leadership deserves rescue, but because its employees deserve protection from decisions they did not make. Ethan lowered his eyes at the words former leadership. Brielle's father stood abruptly. Monroe Global cannot impose moral conditions on private enterprise. Aaliyah met his gaze. We can decide where our money goes. The room answered with silence. Nathaniel then opened a sealed resolution and read the final line. Aaliyah Monroe was formally appointed executive successor and chair of Monroe Global's Social Investment Council, effective immediately. Applause rose across the atrium. Ethan did not join it at first. He only stared at the woman he had once called incapable of moving forward. When the room quieted, Aaliyah stepped down from the stage. Ethan approached, stopping several feet away. "I signed over my shares," he said. "I know. I thought it might prove I'm sorry. Surrendering what you can no longer control is not the same as repairing what you broke." His face tightened, but he nodded. Aaliyah walked past him toward Lorraine and Marisol. Before she reached them, Evelyn placed a final audit report in her hands. It showed that Ethan's surrendered shares had originally been financed by a Monroe-backed guarantee issued at Aaliyah's request years earlier. Legally, she now had the authority to reclaim them. She closed the file and made her first decision as successor. The shares would not return to Ethan or to herself. They would be placed in an employee ownership trust, ensuring the company's future belonged to the people he had nearly sacrificed to protect his ambition. The day Aaliyah's true identity became public, Ethan finally understood that the woman he had abandoned at a shelter had been the quiet force behind nearly every door that ever opened for him. The revelation spread across the financial world before the summit had even ended. Screens in the atrium replayed Nathaniel Monroe introducing Aaliyah as his only daughter and sole successor, while reporters rushed to rewrite the story of Caldwell Innovations from the beginning. Ethan stood beneath the glass ceiling as executives who had once congratulated him began studying him with careful distance. They now knew his earliest financing had been guaranteed through Monroe-linked institutions. They knew his national distribution contracts had reached decision-makers because Aaliyah requested fair consideration. Most of all, they knew he had driven that same woman to a shelter and told her to find someone else because he believed she had nothing left to offer him. Aaliyah did not watch his humiliation. She remained beside Lorraine and Marisol, discussing the independent trust that would protect Harbor Light from future redevelopment. Her calm unsettled Ethan more than anger would have. He had imagined wealth would make her colder, louder, perhaps eager to destroy him. Instead, power seemed to make her more precise. She protected employees, stabilized clients, and placed his surrendered shares into their hands. The only person she refused to rescue was the man who had knowingly discarded her. Brielle approached Aaliyah near the edge of the atrium after most guests had moved toward the reception hall. Her white dress appeared almost colorless beneath the afternoon light. "You planned this," she said. Aaliyah turned toward her. "Plan what?" "The shelter. The meeting. The public reveal." "Ethan chose the shelter. Your family chose the meeting. My father chose to introduce me." Brielle's mouth tightened. "You let us believe you were nobody." "No. You decided that a woman without visible wealth was nobody." Lorraine stood nearby, but Aaliyah lifted one hand, signaling that she did not need protection from the conversation. Brielle lowered her voice. "Ethan would never have left you if he had known. That is not the defense you think it is." The word stopped her. Aaliyah looked toward Ethan, who remained several yards away, listening despite pretending not to. A husband should not require $1 trillion reason to treat his wife with dignity. Brielle glanced at him, perhaps realizing that whatever future she imagined beside Ethan had already collapsed under the same truth. "My father has withdrawn from every Caldwell agreement," she said. "I know. And Marcus is cooperating with the investigation." "I know that too." "Then what happens to us?" Aaliyah's expression remained steady. "That depends on what the audit proves. I will not invent punishment. I will simply stop shielding anyone from consequences." Brielle walked away without another word. Ethan approached only after she disappeared into the crowd. "You could have exposed all of this years ago," he said. "I could have. Why didn't you?" "Because I loved you, and I wanted you to believe your success belonged to your work." "It did. Some of it did." Aaliyah's honesty was not cruel, but it left no space for illusion. "You were talented, Ethan. You were also supported in ways you never bothered to question because you assumed every opportunity proved you were superior to the people beside you." He looked toward the employees gathered around the ownership announcement. "You gave them my company. I gave them a stake in the future they kept alive. And what do you keep?" Aaliyah touched the signet ring on her hand. "Responsibility." Nathaniel joined them, carrying a slim black folder. The independent board has completed its preliminary review, he said. Caldwell Innovations will continue under employee ownership and external leadership. Ethan may remain as a technical advisor if the board approves, but he will hold no executive authority. Ethan absorbed the decision in silence. It was not complete ruin. It was something more difficult, a life in which he would have to contribute without controlling, work without being celebrated, and face the people whose livelihoods he had nearly gambled away. Aaliyah turned to leave. "Wait," he said. She stopped, but did not look back. Ethan reached into his pocket and removed the wedding ring he had left in the car the night before. He placed it in her palm. "I told you to find someone else," he said. "I was wrong." Aaliyah closed her fingers around the ring, then set it on a nearby table. "You were wrong about what I needed to find." Before she walked away, Nathaniel handed her the black folder. Inside was the final succession resolution, signed by every director except Victor. The first line confirmed that Aaliyah Monroe would assume full control of Monroe Global at the end of the quarter. The second revealed something even Ethan had never known. The shelter where he abandoned her stood on land secretly purchased decades earlier by Aaliyah's mother, intended one day to become the foundation of a national refuge network. The shelter Ethan chose as the place to abandon Aaliyah was built on land her mother had once purchased to protect women no one else believed were worth saving. Aaliyah read the succession folder twice while the last guests left the Franklin Center. The property records were old, filed under a charitable trust her mother created before illness pulled her away from public life. Harbor Light had never been intended as a temporary refuge. Her mother's original plan described a national network of safe housing, legal support, job placement, and child care for women rebuilding after abandonment or financial control. The project had stalled after her death, its funding scattered through layers of Monroe foundations until Lorraine kept the first location alive with donations and stubborn discipline. Aaliyah stood beneath the glass atrium holding the pages against her chest, suddenly understanding why the shelter had felt familiar before she knew its history. Her mother had placed compassion into the ground years before her daughter arrived there carrying a suitcase in the rain. Nathaniel watched her from several feet away. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "You should have finished what she started. I could not do it without turning it into another monument to the Monroe name." Aaliyah looked toward Lorraine, who was helping Marisol gather her things. "Then we will not put our name on it." Within days, Aaliyah approved the creation of the Horizon Refuge Network, an independent nonprofit governed by former residents, housing specialists, attorneys, and community leaders. Monroe Global provided the initial capital, but no family member held permanent control. Harbor Light became the first of 12 planned centers across the country, each designed around dignity rather than charity. Private rooms replaced crowded dormitories. On-site child care allowed mothers to attend interviews and training. Legal advocates helped residents protect wages, leases, and custody rights. No marble plaques announced who paid for it. Aaliyah wanted women entering those doors to feel possibility, not debt. Ethan learned of the project through the company's employee bulletin. Caldwell Innovations had become partly employee-owned, and its engineering division volunteered to redesign security systems for the shelters at cost. He submitted his name to the team, but Aaliyah did not approve or reject him personally. She left the decision to the independent board. He was accepted as a technical advisor with no authority over contracts or publicity. For the first time in his career, he worked on something he could not claim. One afternoon, he arrived at Harbor Light carrying blueprints and found Aaliyah in the courtyard beside Lorraine. He stopped several feet away. "I did not know about your mother," he said. "Neither did I. This place was part of your family all along." Aaliyah looked toward the women moving through the bright new lobby. "No, it belongs to the people who need it." Ethan nodded, then handed Lorraine the plans without asking Aaliyah to praise them. That small restraint did not repair what he had broken, but she noticed it. Brielle and Walter Harrington faced civil claims after the audit confirmed their offices had received stolen Monroe intelligence. Marcus agreed to testify in exchange for reduced liability, and Victor's voting rights were permanently revoked. Aaliyah refused every suggestion that she used the scandal to destroy them publicly. "Accountability is enough," she told the board. "Humiliation is not governance." At the end of the quarter, Nathaniel formally transferred executive control of Monroe Global to his daughter. The ceremony took place not in the corporate atrium, but inside Harbor Light's renovated community room, Lorraine stood beside Aaliyah. Marisol attended with her daughter, and her first full paycheck from Monroe's housing division folded inside her purse. Nathaniel placed the signet ring in Aaliyah's hand and asked whether she was ready. "I am ready to be responsible," she said. Later that evening, Evelyn brought her the final divorce agreement. Ethan had signed without contesting property, reputation, or access to the Monroe name. Attached was one request: a brief conversation at the shelter entrance where he had left her. Aaliyah agreed. Under the same red neon sign, he stood without a car, assistant, or excuse. "I told you to find someone else," he said. "I thought being needed made a person valuable." Aaliyah looked through the glass doors at the life growing inside. Then she removed her wedding ring and placed it in his open palm. "I did find someone else," she said softly. "The woman I had abandoned inside myself." The man who told Aaliyah Monroe to find someone else never imagined she would find an entire future waiting inside the place where he left her. 1 year after the rain-soaked night outside Harbor Light, the red neon sign was gone. In its place stood a wide glass entrance framed by warm brick and soft gold lighting, welcoming families into the first completed center of the Horizon Refuge Network. Aaliyah arrived before sunrise, not in a motorcade, but in a quiet town car she dismissed at the curb. She wore a cream suit, low heels, and her mother's pendant. The Monroe signet ring remained on her right hand, no longer hidden and no longer heavy. Inside, Lorraine was directing volunteers while Marisol arranged flowers with her daughter near the reception desk. 12 new centers were under construction. Thousands of women had received legal and housing support, and Monroe Global had adopted employee protection standards across every company it funded. Reporters called Aaliyah's leadership revolutionary. She thought of it as overdue. Nathaniel had stepped back from daily operations, though he still appeared every Thursday with coffee and questions he pretended were casual. Their relationship had not healed through one dramatic reunion. It had been rebuilt in ordinary conversations, disagreements spoken without distance, and the slow discovery that love did not require control to feel protective. Victor no longer held a seat at Monroe Global. Marcus Vail had testified about the scheme involving the Harringtons, and the resulting settlements funded independent cybersecurity programs for charitable organizations. Brielle withdrew from public business for several months before returning to lead a smaller family division under strict oversight. Aaliyah did not follow her life closely. Justice had been served through truth, not obsession. Caldwell Innovations survived as an employee-owned company with a new chief executive elected by its board. Ethan remained as a technical advisor, working without private drivers, executive privileges, or the certainty that every room would turn toward him. He completed every shelter security project assigned to his team and never attached his name to the announcements. Aaliyah occasionally saw his reports. They were careful, useful, and free of the inflated language he once used to make ordinary work sound like conquest. She did not mistake improvement for entitlement to her forgiveness. Growth belonged to the person doing it. Access to her life did not. On the anniversary of their divorce, Ethan requested one final meeting. Aaliyah agreed to 10 minutes in Harbor Light's garden, where the rain had been replaced by early spring sunlight. He arrived carrying no flowers and no ring. "I used to think losing you was my punishment," he said. "Now I understand that thinking still made everything about me." Aaliyah listened without rescuing him from the silence. "You were never poor," he continued. "Not in any way that mattered. I was the one measuring people by what they could give me." "And now?" she asked. "Now I am trying to become useful without needing to be admired." His answer was not perfect, but it was honest. Aaliyah nodded once. "Then keep trying." He looked toward the center's open doors, where women moved freely between classrooms, counseling offices, and bright private rooms. "Are you happy?" he asked. Aaliyah considered the question. Happiness no longer felt like a prize awarded after suffering. It felt like mornings when she trusted her own choices, evenings when no one asked her to become smaller, and work that returned dignity to people who had been told they were burdens. "I am whole," she said. "That is better." Ethan accepted the answer and left without asking whether he could return. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah stood on the center's front steps as Nathaniel opened the dedication ceremony. He did not introduce her as a trillionaire's daughter. He called her the founder of a future her mother had imagined and she had chosen to complete. Applause rose from the crowd, but Aaliyah's eyes moved to Lorraine, Marisol, and every woman standing beneath the new entrance. The night Ethan abandoned her, he believed he had dropped a powerless wife at a shelter. In truth, he had left the sole heir to a trillion-dollar empire at the doorway of her own purpose. Aaliyah smiled as the doors opened behind her. She had not found someone else. She had found herself, her family, and a reason to make sure no woman abandoned in the rain would ever again be mistaken for someone with nowhere to go.